Ladies and gentlemen, we have another big trade to announce. The Colorado Avalanche finally made a deal for a goaltender, and they made a huge trade here with San Jose with multiple exchanging parts. This trade has been a long time in the making, and it is a huge one. We're going to be breaking down all the pieces in this deal, seeing which team won, so make sure you watch till the end for all that. And hit that subscribe button if you're new for more trade content just like this as we leap to the deadline this year. But honestly, this holiday season has been a deadline in and of itself. Now, this is not the first goalie trade the Avs have made. They already went out and got Scott Wedgwood, but they go out and get another goaltender here in MacKenzie Blackwood, which has been rumored for a while now. Here, though, we get the official confirmation from Elliotte Friedman, who broke the news first, saying that MacKenzie Blackwood to Colorado is confirmed. And I'm gonna be honest, I was pretty shocked when I saw the actual trade return, so let's get into it. Frank Cervelli gives us the whole trade breakdown. It is a massive one, not just being like a couple of picks for MacKenzie Blackwood. It is a deal with multiple parts. As we see the Avs going after MacKenzie Blackwood, they also get depth forward Givani Smith from the Sharks and a 2027 fifth round pick. In exchange, the Sharks get Alexandar Georgiev, Nikolai Kovalenko, a 2026 second round pick, and a 2025 fifth round pick. Now, this deal is just so fascinating for so many reasons. First, we see a goaltender and a forward exchange between both teams, with MacKenzie Blackwood, of course, going to the Avs and Georgiev going to the Sharks. This is a very interesting one, though, for the Avs perspective, because especially with the cap space, they could have just made a straight MacKenzie Blackwood for picks type of swap work. But this is why I think the Avs have more up their sleeve throughout the rest of this year, because in exchanging Blackwood and having all these different deals, giving rid of Smith, Georgiev, Kovalenko, they actually add some cap space with this deal. With MacKenzie Blackwood exchanging $2.3 million, for example, and go to Colorado, Georgiev was making $3.4 million this year. Now, his contract wasn't too horrible considering that it was ending after this season, but the Avs do gain a little bit of cap space in this deal, which I think is pretty massive for them. Obviously, way more than I think they would have given up if it was just MacKenzie Blackwood for a couple of picks, but the fact they were able to get rid of the Georgiev's contract, I think means that they have something up their sleeve for the future. Also means that they're pretty confident in Scott Wedgwood being the backup for the future as well. I mean, why not? In the 3 games he's played so far with the Avs, he's a .951 save percentage. Obviously, pretty short sample size, but so far so good. And you have MacKenzie Blackwood, who I think has been one of the more underrated goalies in the entire league over these past few years. Ever since he went to San Jose, really, he's put up some pretty good numbers in some poor defensive systems. And you look over the past few seasons, just getting an .899 save percentage last year on last year's Sharks team was honestly a miracle. But you can see so far 19 games and a .910 save percentage. Even though the Sharks have improved, it's not by a huge margin. Blackwood has been incredible, though, for the Sharks, and he was somebody that was always going to likely be dealt no matter what. It's pretty great management by the Sharks, though, considering they got Blackwood for just a 6th round pick and have turned him into this massive trade commodity. It's something, though, that I think the Avs could really benefit from. Georgiev has just not been that guy for the Avs for a couple of seasons now. He had a good first season there in Colorado back in 2023. But you see just the dip in his play, and this year at 18 games and .874 save percentage, somehow even worse than he was last season and less consistent. He's just somebody that we knew was likely going to be gone eventually if it wasn't just from them letting him go in free agency this offseason. Georgiev was on his way out, and I think it was smart for the Avs to get it done as quick as possible. Personally, for me, I think the biggest risk would be Georgiev playing more games for your team. I don't think the Avs wanted that, and the Sharks are in a position where they can still tank a little bit from some bad goaltending, and Georgiev is perfect for that. And who knows, for the Sharks and how much they were able to turn MacKenzie Blackwood around, maybe they re-sign Georgiev and they trade him for a 2nd round pick in a couple of years. They've done some magic already. We'll see if they can do more. Now, the Sharks exchanged 5th round picks, so nothing all that consequential there, but they do get a 2nd round pick, and they also get Nikolai Kovalenko in this deal, who I think is a pretty interesting one. 25 years old, and he's somebody that came in, had some hype as a potential Calder candidate. Well, has been okay for Colorado, but hasn't really been able to perfect himself into that top 6 or really find a perfect role for himself. In 28 games, 4 goals, 4 assists for 8 points. He's still a big question mark, big amount of bad magic beans. We'll see what ends up happening with him, but he's someone to look out for in this deal on top of the 2nd round pick that could provide some value. Looking at the forward that Colorado got in Givani Smith, I don't think there's going to be too much of consequence with this one either. He's somebody that has barely played for San Jose this year, likely was in the deal just to make the roster sizes work or something like that. He's not going to be a substantial player going back to the Avs, and I wouldn't expect him to be. Really, the main prize is MacKenzie Blackwood, who's going to be looked at as hopefully the savior for this Avs goaltending that has really needed some stability in net. That, to me, has been consistently the biggest problem for this Avalanche team, and it's what's held them back from being a much better record so far this year. They've had some good stretches, but the goaltending has really sunk them. That's why they already traded for Blackwood and are making another goalie trade so early in the season. But I love the Avs aggression. They are a team that I think can still win, still compete, still has a lot of potential, but some of those roster pit holes have really failing them so far this year. Georgiev was one of them, and I think they got a much better goaltender back. Now the question will Blackwood be able to do that in a different system? Was it just some San Jose magic juice that they were putting all over him, and that falls under in Colorado? There's always those question marks around goaltenders. They can never be a sure thing, but in Blackwood's case, he's improved every single season in his time with San Jose. He's right in the prime of his career, and I think considering everything, came fairly cheap. Sure, Colorado gave up a second round pick, but who cares? If you're Colorado, you're trying to win Stanley Cups, and I think Blackwood gives you a much better chance than they had before. You look at that Central Division, man, and it is absolutely tough. You had Winnipeg, who was dominating to start things off. They've slowed back a little bit. Now you have Minnesota established as the top dog. You got Dallas, and even outside of Colorado, a team like Utah that has been a lot better as of late. They're in the race, and if they get a couple wins, would tie the Avs in terms of points. But you look at that Western Conference in general, too, and you got Edmonton, you got Calgary in those wild card spots. Even Seattle is in that potential range. So the Avs can't afford to lose any points in this race. They really need to start going here. They have won their last 2 games, so that is good for them. But the goaltending was something that was really needing to improve. I mean, yeah, in terms of the goals for and goals against, you look at the different teams here. Colorado, in terms of goals against, is by far the worst in the Central, which is pretty astounding considering just how bad the Nashville Predators have been. That is not a stat that I think the Avs love to see themselves in. So trying to shore that up and at least helping out the goaltending a little bit was, I think, a priority for them. It's why we've not just heard about Blackwood as an option for the Avs this year, but I mean, as early as last year. I remember there being a lot of chatter about a Blackwood to Colorado deal. So I'm glad it's finally happened. I think for the Avs, it's exactly the type of deal they need to make. And there was maybe better goalies they could have traded for, but at the same time, considering who was on the market and considering Blackwood's lack of reputation, I think he was the best option. I think he gives them a lot more potential. And even though I don't think he is a sure thing, he's about as good as you can get, especially for the lower price the Avs paid for. Now, it is interesting because I think the Sharks have been a lot better over the last month or so. They've been rocking around a 500 record, if not a little bit better. They've had a much better stretch since Lachlan Celebrini has come back from his injury. So there might be some people saying that, they're doing so well, they're playing a lot more competitively. Why would you trade Blackwood now? Well, I think the price indicates exactly why they did it. They got a second round pick for somebody, again, they brought him for just a 6th. And if the Sharks are confident in their goaltending, in their development going forward, you got a player like Yaroslav Askarov, who I think could easily come in and become the starter eventually. So even though Blackwood was somebody that I think was pretty integral to the Sharks, I think he was somebody that was probably going to be in his 30s by the time the Sharks were actually starting to truly compete. And I think getting him at this price and trading him away for the price that they did, I think was a smart move in the end. Plus, this will give more time to Askarov too in that tandem, and I think that'll be interesting, though I'm not really sure what to expect out of Georgiev. Maybe he ends up rebounding. We'll see there. But I think trading Blackwood while his value is at the highest, which is probably this season, was the correct move. Maybe the Sharks could have waited to the deadline, but honestly, considering what they got back, I think it's a pretty fair deal. Plus, you look at the opportunity there is on the wings for the Sharks team, and there's a lot of potential for a player like Kovalenko to potentially come in on maybe on the power play, maybe even get a top middle 6 spot. I like players like Ethan Cardwell, but I think most likely they'll end up being AHLers for the rest of this year. You could easily have Kovalenko, I think, on that third line with Kostin and Granlund and potentially make that type of fit work. Obviously, that first line you shouldn't touch. I mean, what they've been able to do, Eklund, Celebrini, Zetterlund, they've been fantastic there, so I think you don't touch that. But there's options for this Sharks team to get better. In Kovalenko's case, I think he will improve that forward group a little bit, though not by a substantial amount. It is interesting, though, the Avs have a bit of a forward depth problem. I think that has been an issue for them this season. They do fix, I think, their goaltending problem a little bit, but the forward group gets even worse somehow. Thankfully for them, they've had some injured players like Nichushkin come back in. Obviously, Kovalenko wasn't really looking like a fixture on that forward group anyways, but I think for the Avs, this is where that extra cap space in this deal does come into play. I think that is a reason why they wanted to trade Georgiev in the end. If they traded for Blackwood, they likely wouldn't have that many options going forward, but now they have some extra cap space. They could easily add to that forward group if they wanted to towards the end of the deadline, if they were to want to do that, especially in the middle 6. There are some improvements I think that could be made. We'll see if they actually end up making them, but I look at that third line center spot, and Parker Kelly is a fine NHLer, but they could really use an upgrade there. I think that's what the Avs could be targeting in the future. We'll see what ends up happening, but there's options for the Avs, and more options now with that added cap space. Now, in terms of who actually won this deal, it's hard to not say the Sharks won it for sure. I mean, that doesn't mean the Avs didn't. I think they won this deal as well. Getting a player like Blackwood, I think, was extremely important for what they needed going forward this season. But I can't help but feel like the Sharks, who only gave up a 6th round pick for Blackwood, Blackwood originally are able to turn him into this pretty solid deal back, a second rounder, a fifth, and a player like Kovalenko who could potentially be a useful piece. I think that was just a win for this Sharks organization. They were able to not just make that trade, but boost a player like Blackwood so that he could get traded like that. It seems like the Sharks have really taken a step in their player development, and Blackwood is one of the biggest success stories so far. And hey, if they can do that to Blackwood, I'm really confident in what they'll be able to do with Yaroslav Askarov, who just has so much potential, so much skill with him. He's something that I think has the potential to be a great starter, but with how much they've already done to their goaltending so far, I think the Sharks could really benefit from Askarov and the full development that he ends up getting. So in terms of the trades and which team I think wins, I think San Jose gets the best out of this deal, but I give San Jose a big win and Colorado a pretty solid win. I think both teams get out of this trade very solidly, and especially for the Sharks, who did so much with Blackwood to prop him up and to increase that trade value, they got the best out of it. But I think the Avs will also benefit from the development in Blackwood's game and him being fully in the prime of his career. We'll see if he ends up being that guy, especially for the playoffs. That'll be a big test that Blackwood will need to face. But so far, I think Blackwood has had the chops, and we'll see if he's able to turn that around with Colorado and turn that goaltending around, especially because they need it really badly. One thing I also want to note before we go is that Chris Johnson reports on the actual retention on the Georgiev deal that the Avs are retaining 14% of the salary, which is pretty decent. It's not a crazy amount or anything, but this would take Georgiev below $3 million, which I think is actually good for the Sharks, all things considered. Maybe they could have gotten a better pick if they didn't retain salary, but I think this leads me to more of a belief the Sharks will end up flipping Georgiev down the line, potentially getting good with him and giving him some sheltered roles over the next couple of months, going against bad teams, let's say, and maybe props up his save percentage to potentially be dealt as a rental. I don't think in any scenario Georgiev would be dealt for that much, but the fact that his salary is a little bit lower, there is some retention there, makes that contract a little bit more palatable for other teams. By the way, for the Sharks, it's pretty important too, since they don't have any retention slots left, so they would not be able to retain any deal, any contract, any salary on Georgiev's potential trade out of San Jose. So that leaves them with whatever the Avs give to them. So it makes it a lot more like the Georgiev is flipped from San Jose, and I think he'll be a name to watch out for at this year's deadline. Let me know your thoughts down below on this full Blackwood trade. What are your thoughts? What do you think about both the Sharks and the Avs perspective? Who do you think wins this trade the most? I would love to know your thoughts down below on that. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already for more trade content just like this all throughout the year. Of course, share the video for all the hockey fans, especially the Avs and Sharks fans out there. It is a pretty major trade for both teams involved, so make sure you get that news out to them. And of course, click on this card for all of my trade content right in one playlist. So much there. I mean, a couple of trades already this month. We have the Jacob Trouba deal as well, which was pretty massive. If you want to check out my thoughts on that, you can go to that playlist as well. And I will see you guys in the next one. I hope you have a fantastic hockey day. Make sure to drink some water for me, okay? And I'll see you. Goodbye.